It had been 4 long months since I'd been up to the cabin. Winter came early that year and didn't let go until late March, turning the mountain roads into frozen veins of gravel and black ice. So I waited in the city in my glass office tower in Santa Fe, surrounded by polished concrete and espresso machines, dreaming of pine needles and wind and birds that didn't sound like car alarms. When the roads finally thawed and the forest came alive again, I loaded up my truck with tools, gear, and 3 full jugs of propane, ready for a weekend of silence and chainsaw work. The drive up was glorious. Not a single email, no reception, just a podcast about wilderness survival and the hum of the tires. I reached the old forest road just before noon. The moment my tires hit that gravel, something in my chest loosened. The trees were taller than I remembered. Greener, too. I parked my truck beside the cabin, just like I had a dozen times before. The same flat spot under the ponderosa pine, where the ruts in the dirt still remembered my good years. I stepped out, stretched my arms, and took my first real breath in months. The mountain air hit different. No exhaust, no fried food smells, just juniper, pine sap, and the faint scent of cold stone. And then I heard it. Excuse me. It came sharp and nasal, slicing through the quiet like a mosquito with a megaphone. I turned to see a woman, probably in her 50s, wearing a polo shirt tucked into khaki capri, aviators, and a ball cap with a shiny badge pinned to it that read Clear Pine Ridge. President. In one hand, she held a walkie-talkie. In the other, her phone already filming. You can't park here, she barked, marching up the incline like she owned the soil. This is private community parking only. You're not registered. I blinked. This is my property, I said. Private land. Deed, surveyed, fenced, and paid off. I'm not in your HOA, she snorted. That's not how this works. This entire area falls under the Clear Pine Ridge Association. If you're on this road, you're under our governance. I stepped toward my truck, grabbed my backpack, and slung it over my shoulder. Ma'am, you're mistaken. This cabin and the 7 acres surrounding it are not and never have been part of any homeowners association. I bought it off an old hunter named Earl Sims. I have a recorded easement for this road. I can show you the paperwork. I don't need your paperwork, she snapped, holding her phone higher. I have authority. We have rules. And rule number 1 is that unauthorized vehicles are subject to removal and a fine of $150. I stood there stunned for a moment. She actually believed she had jurisdiction here. I opened the back of my truck and pulled out a weathered binder with laminated documents. I kept it handy ever since some would-be hiker claimed my fire pit was public land. I flipped to the map. This here is the TA County Land Registry, Lot 111. That's mine. And right here, I tapped the line, is the easement I used to access it. Recorded in the county since 1974. She didn't even look. Fake. People print things off the internet all the time. It doesn't matter what you say. We say you can't be here. I'm calling for a tow right now. She pressed the walkie-talkie to her mouth. Unit 1 to base. I have a violator at North Trailhead. Unauthorized vehicle and possible trespassing. Preparing to escalate. I looked around, half expecting some neighborhood security golf cart to come tearing through the woods. Lady, I said, keeping my voice even. I don't know what kind of control trip you're on, but you're harassing a man on his own land. She took a step closer and smiled like she was enjoying this. Oh, you'll learn how things work around here. You're not special. We've dealt with your kind before. I raised an eyebrow. My kind? Loners? Cabin types think the rules don't apply, but they do. We will educate you. I'd had enough. I stepped away from her and pulled out my phone. There wasn't a single bar, of course, but I knew exactly where to drive to get signal. I headed back toward the truck, ignoring her shrill voice, still chirping into the radio. I'll be back, she shouted. And if that truck's still here, it's getting towed. I looked back at her once before climbing in. Tell the sheriff to bring a measuring tape. He'll need it to calculate how far outside your jurisdiction you are. I drove 2 miles back down the road, just far enough to catch a signal. I dialed the Tawas County Sheriff's Office and asked for Deputy Buckner. We'd worked together 2 years ago when some out-of-state poachers tried to hunt elk on my land. Buckner was solid, calm, no nonsense, and he didn't like people messing with boundaries. He picked up on the second ring. Dan, you still up in the hills? I am, and someone from the Clear Pine Ridge HOA just tried to annex my front yard, he sighed. Karen? That her name? Sounds like her. Stay put. I'll come up. I gave him the coordinates. The line went dead. I leaned back in the driver's seat and exhaled slowly. So much for a quiet weekend. The HOA had arrived. I didn't have to wait long. Maybe 40 minutes later, I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. Deputy Buckner's black and tan Tahoe rolled up the forest road like a bear on patrol. Steady, slow, and unbothered by the nonsense he was about to deal with. I had parked just past the split in the road that led to my cabin. From the curve where I was waiting, I could see Karen's SUV still parked right in front of my gate. She stood beside it like some self-appointed gatekeeper, arms folded, sunglasses on, chin tilted high like she was posing for a HOA-themed action movie no one asked for. As Buckner pulled up, she waved her walkie in the air like she'd summoned him herself. "Oh, thank God," she said, walking straight toward his window as he stepped out. "Officer, I need you to remove that man immediately. He's trespassing on HOA. Regulated land. He's verbally aggressive and maybe mentally unstable." Buckner barely glanced at her. "Afternoon, Karen," he said flatly. She blinked, thrown off. "You know me?" He gave her a look like a school principal seeing a repeat offender. "Oh, I know of you." Then he turned to me. "Dan, deputy." We shook hands. Karen's mouth opened like a fish yanked from a lake. "Wait, you two know each other?" Buckner ignored her and pulled a worn leather notepad from his back pocket. "You got those documents on you?" "Sure do," I said, pulling out my binder and flipping to the map page. I handed it over. He studied it for all of 5 seconds. Same easement, same boundary lines. Nothing changed. Karen stepped in, jabbing her finger at the page. "That map is incorrect. It's an outdated version. I have the HOA boundary map downloaded from our internal server." Buckner held up a hand, stopping her mid-sentence. "Miss Meadow, I'm going to need you to take 3 big steps back, lower your voice, and stop interrupting." She froze, visibly, trying to decide if she was more offended or more afraid. He looked back at me. "You're still accessing through the West Road. Same as always." Buckner nodded, turned back to her, and said in a tone colder than the snowpack in January, "This is not HOA land. You do not have jurisdiction here. In fact, you're the one dangerously close to criminal trespassing." Karen's mouth finally found words again, but they came out all in a rush. "That's ridiculous. I've been president of Clear Pine Ridge for 6 years. I oversee 27 homes, 3 miles of private road, and I've never seen this man before. He doesn't belong here." Buckner took a step forward. "This isn't your development. This is his land. Your authority ends at the red gate down the hill. You've now harassed a private property owner, threatened him with illegal towing, and falsely accused him to law enforcement." Karen turned white. "Now," he continued, "do you want to walk away calmly, or do you want me to make this official?" Her lips trembled like she was buffering. I didn't realize. I thought the map. We had a new one." "Sure you did," he said. She stood there another few seconds, then huffed and stormed back to her SUV. As she opened the door, she turned back around and hissed, "This isn't over." I looked at Buckner. "That's what they say right before it is." He chuckled. "You want to file a complaint?" "Already recorded most of it," I said, holding up my phone. "Got her face, her voice, her badge, and her threat." "Good," he said. "Let's get it on record anyway, just in case she gets creative." We drove back down the hill where he took my statement. I gave him a copy of the map, a USB drive with the video, and a written description of everything that happened. He promised to attach it to her file. Apparently, I wasn't her first education project. After Buckner left, I drove back up, opened the gate, and parked where I'd been before. This time I stayed, hauled my gear inside, opened the windows, and lit the fire in the stove to burn off the musty air. For a moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, that was the end of it, that the sheriff's warning would send her slinking back into her HOA cave, never to emerge again. But as I watched a bluebird land on the railing and saw my dog flop down by the porch, tail wagging in lazy circles, something gnawed at me. Karen wasn't the type to admit she was wrong. She was the type to come back with paperwork and backup. I made a mental note to double-check my cameras, and I left the binder out on the counter just in case I needed to remind someone again whose land this was. I came back 2 days later with a new chainsaw chain, a few replacement tools, and the kind of naive optimism you only get after dealing with bureaucracy that seemed for once to respect reality. The cabin was calling, and I figured I'd finally get a quiet weekend. No HOA patrols, no screaming women with walkie-talkies. That fantasy lasted about 17 seconds. I turned onto the gravel access road and nearly slammed on the brakes. Sitting GHT in the middle of the narrow path that led to my gate was a massive slab of sandstone, easily the size of a compact car, deliberately placed to block the entire path. Bright red spray paint on its face read, "Private, show access only." Below it, a shiny new sign was bolted to a steel stake in the dirt. "Residents only beyond this point. Violators will be towed." It wasn't just a prank. It was a message. I stepped out, walked up to the boulder, and ran my hand across the paint. Still fresh. Whoever placed it hadn't just rolled it in. They'd used machinery. The tracks confirmed it. 2 distinct sets of wide tire marks led off into the trees, probably from some HOA contractor with more loyalty than brains. I took photos from every angle, marked the GPS coordinates, and called the sheriff's office again. This time, Buckner was off duty, so I left a report and contacted a local towing company with experience in rural extractions. They quoted me a few $100 and arrived an hour later with a skid steer on a trailer. The driver, a scruffy guy named Luis, took one look at the boulder and said, "You piss off some HOA queen?" I just nodded. We got the rock out of there and rolled it down the hillside into a dry creek bed. Legal? Probably satisfying? Extremely. Back at the cabin, I made coffee and sat down to check my mail. I hadn't expected anything. The cabin address wasn't on most public systems, but someone had clearly gone out of their way to find me. Tucked inside the screen door was a manila envelope sealed with the clear Pine Ridge HOA stamp. Inside, an official-looking letter on letterhead, full of lawyer speak and implied threats. It stated that the road I used was in fact part of community infrastructure and that any continued use of it required written permission from the board and submission of an access application with administrative fee. They even attached a print out of what they claimed was a map clearly altered showing the road highlighted in blue and marked HOA maintained. I almost laughed. The font on the map didn't even match the original. It was the kind of half-assed forgery someone puts together in PowerPoint after 3 glasses of wine. What pissed me off wasn't the attempt. It was the audacity. They were trying to create a paper trail so that a year from now someone could point to it and say, "See, he was never supposed to be there." I drove back to town that night, sat down with my lawyer the next morning, old friend of mine from college named Marina Hurst, now working private practice with a specialty in property disputes. She looked at the documents, listened to my story, and didn't even blink. "This kind of crap happens more than you'd believe," she said. "But most people just fold." "You're not folding." "Not a chance," I said. "Then we're going to make them regret it." She helped me draft a formal cease and desist, citing the original easement documents, the county records, and the harassment history. She also prepared a notice of intent to file civil action, a legal warning shot letting them know we weren't bluffing. Back at the cabin, I mounted 2 new trail cameras. One along the road, hidden in a hollowed-out log, and another angled toward the footbridge by the creek. Motion-activated infrared high-res. I wasn't going to rely on just my eyes anymore. These people clearly thought if they couldn't outlaw me, they'd out-sabotage me. I buried the wiring, synced everything to a local backup hard drive hidden inside the cabin wall, and made sure I could access the feed through a remote uplink from town. Not paranoid, just prepared. I had no illusions now. Karen wasn't going to let this go. She'd lost the first round and came back with forged documents and construction equipment. Next time, she'd come with worse. A week passed in relative calm. Too calm. The cameras stayed silent, save for the occasional deer nosing around, or a wild turkey doing its strut like it owned the place. No Karen, no signs, no walkie-talkie sermons. I'd almost started to think maybe the cease and desist had finally landed with the kind of legal gravity she couldn't ignore. Then one morning, I checked the trail cam footage. The log cam, the one by the road, had triggered just before dawn. 3 figures hooded, carrying tools. One held a crowbar. Another had what looked like a gas can. I paused the footage and leaned closer. They didn't go for the cabin. They went for the bridge. That little footbridge over the creek might not seem like much, but it was the only dry way in once snow melt flooded the banks. It was made of cedar and railroad spikes. I'd reinforced it myself. On the footage, I watched as they pried up the planks one by one and tossed them into the brush like firewood. Then they poured what looked like motor oil along the path up to the cabin. Black streaks on the dirt meant to create a slip hazard on the incline. And the last guy. He squatted down and carefully placed something on the gravel road. I zoomed in. Tire spikes, welded metal triangles, sharp as hell. They weren't just sending a message. They were trying to injure someone. Or worse. I downloaded the footage to a flash drive, grabbed my binder, and headed straight into TA. Buckner met me outside the sheriff's station before I could even finish my coffee. "You got something?" he asked. "Oh, yeah," I said. "You're going to love this." We went into the back office and I showed him the footage. He watched in silence. No comments, no reactions, just took mental notes. When the clip ended, he leaned back and whistled low. "That's felony vandalism, trespassing, reckless endangerment, and criminal sabotage. And that's just what I can charge them with before lunch." He paused. "Do you recognize any of them?" I nodded. "The tall one. I've seen him driving Karen's car. Pretty sure he's her nephew. The stocky one used to do landscaping on the HOA lots." "All right," he said. "Let's do this by the book." Less than 24 hours later, Buckner rolled up the mountain road again, but this time with a second patrol car behind him. I watched from the cabin porch as he and another deputy walked straight into Clear Pine Ridge like it was a raid. I couldn't hear everything, but I saw the moment Karen came out still in her bathrobe shouting something about overreach and fabricated evidence. They cuffed her anyway. Her nephew didn't put up a fight. Neither did the other man. They were walked out. Hands behind their backs, stuffed into the back of the patrol car like overgrown teenagers caught stealing hubcaps. Karen screamed all the way into the cruiser. Something about her rights, something about lawsuits, something about me. I filmed it. Not out of spite. Out of self-preservation. HOA types like her, they twist things. And the only thing HOA boards fear more than legal action is public humiliation. That video went viral. I posted it to a private landowner forum I followed, then to Reddit. The title was simple. HOA president arrested for sabotage on private property. By morning, it had 20,000 upvotes and 5 local news outlets requesting interviews. I ignored most of them. I wasn't doing this for internet clout. I just wanted my peace and my trees. That evening, as the sun dropped behind the pines and the cold settled in, I stood at the edge of the ruined footbridge and looked at the mess. It had taken a weekend to fix, maybe 2. But I'd sleep better that night knowing they were behind bars, even if just temporarily. And that now I had more than just words and maps. I had proof. Real, ugly, undeniable proof. They wanted a war. They just picked the wrong forest. I thought jail might have cooled her off. Thought maybe a night behind bars and the stench of a holding cell toilet would remind Karen that HOA power didn't stretch into the real world. But apparently she took that jail time not as a warning but as fuel. 3 days after the arrests, I got a letter in my mailbox, a different kind of envelope this time, slick legal grade paper with a return address from the Clear Pine Ridge Municipal Advisory Committee. That sounded like government. It wasn't. I would learn that fast. Inside was a formal request, or rather a demand for me to cease all vehicular access to my property until a pending road ownership dispute could be resolved. They included a printed notice stamped with what looked like a county seal. Until I noticed the fine print at the bottom, Clear Pine Ridge Community Enforcement Subcommittee. Internal draft. No judge, no clerk, no legitimacy. It was theater. But the next part was worse. They had attached a revised regional survey, a map showing the old access road marked as part of HOA-maintained land. My easement completely missing. In its place, a new path cutting awkwardly through a drainage gully labeled proposed alternate access for out-off community parcels. As if my land were some accidental blemish in their vision board of cul-de-sacs and matching mailboxes. They weren't just pushing back. They were trying to erase me. I took the papers straight to Marina. She read them in silence, then chuckled darkly. "Well," she said, "this is a cute attempt at municipal cosplay. Can they do anything with it? If a judge were blind, drunk, and newly lobotomized, maybe, but no, they're trying to make it look legitimate enough to confuse people. Real playbook stuff. Most folks would panic and comply. Not me. Good, she said. Then let's hit back. She filed a formal motion for declaratory relief with the county, a request for a judge to formally affirm my easement rights and the invalidity of any HOA claim. At the same time, we drafted a complaint for civil harassment. It and defamation just in case they pushed this further. Then came the real twist. One morning, the UPS guy refused to drive up the road. Said his onboard system marked the address as restricted. I pulled out my phone and opened Google Maps. Sure enough, the road to my property now read, Private HOA Road Access Limited. Even worse, in satellite mode, someone had uploaded a photo with the caption, Clear Pine Ridge Private Drive, Resident Use Only. I nearly put my fist through the ETB cabin wall. I knew what this was. Karen or someone on her behalf had submitted edits to Google Maps. It's not hard if you know the right portals, and to a driver who doesn't know better, it looks official. I submitted correction requests immediately. Then I went further. I posted the whole saga, screenshots, faked maps, and all to a land rights subreddit along with a warning. PSA HOA trying to gaslight Google Maps into rewriting my easement. If it can happen to me, it can happen to you. It exploded. Thousands of comments. Dozens of people shared similar stories. Digital gerrymandering, map sabotage, HOA scare tactics. Someone from the OpenStreetMap volunteer group even messaged me directly and flagged the changes for rollback. I wasn't just some crank in the woods anymore. I was a case study. But Karen wasn't finished. Not yet. 2 days later, I got a visit from a man who introduced himself as a regional compliance observer, whatever the hell that meant, claiming to conduct an environmental risk assessment on behalf of the HOA. I told him to get off my property before I turned his clipboard into compost. Then I checked the trail cams again, just in case. I was splitting firewood when I saw the SUV roll up. Not the usual anonymous HOA minivan or some clipboard-carrying scout. No, this was Karen herself, back from the ashes, looking freshly blow-dried and twice as unhinged. She parked half-cocked in the middle of the access road, got out and strode toward the gate like she was delivering a ceasefire treaty. In one hand, she clutched a thick folder of papers. In the other, her ever-present phone already filming. Daniel Rivers, she called out, voice high and theatrical. You are officially being notified that your usage of this roadway is under administrative suspension. I didn't respond. I kept stacking logs. She pushed through the gate, which legally was already grounds for arrest after the court filings, and waved the folder like it was a holy document. This is a declaration from the Clear Pine Ridge Association's Governing Council, co-signed by the Development Oversight Group and Land Use Review Board. As of today, your access is in direct violation of Procedural Order 51B. I looked up slowly. Karen, do you just staple random nouns together until it sounds like law? She stepped closer. Don't patronize me. These are real documents. This road, she slapped her hand on the dirt, has been flagged for transitional review as part of a pending easement nullification. I walked over and took the folder from her hand. She didn't resist. In fact, she seemed proud of it, like a toddler handing over a finger painting. I flipped through the pages. The formatting was clean, fonts consistent. It even had a fake watermark. But it was all gibberish. Citations to internal HOA clauses with no legal authority beyond the subdivision boundaries. She had clearly spent hours crafting this bureaucratic fever dream, hoping that somewhere along the way I'd just throw up my hands and give in. I didn't. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out an envelope of my own. I'd been carrying it for days just in case. This, I said, handing it to her, is a district court injunction. It confirms my legal right to access this road via easement recorded in 1974. It includes a judge's order restraining you personally from entering or interfering with my land. That includes screaming, posturing, and creative fiction writing. Her face drained of color. That can't be real. It's real enough that the sheriff's department has a copy and Buckner should be here right on cue. Tires crunched on gravel. The same Tahoe as before pulled up behind her SUV. Buckner stepped out slow and deliberate, hands on his belt like he already knew how this was going to go. Karen, he said without inflection. We've talked about this. You don't understand, she shouted. He's ignoring the revised land status. There is no revised land status, Buckner said flatly. You were warned. You've been served. And now you've violated a court order. She turned to me, shrieking. This isn't over. He stepped forward. Yes, it is. Then he cuffed her. No drama this time. No struggle. Just the click of steel and a long, exhausted silence as she was led to the back of the cruiser. From the trees, I noticed 2 hikers had stopped to watch. One pulled out their phone and filmed the scene. Another shouted, "Hell yeah. HOA queen dethroned." I couldn't help it. I smiled. Buckner turned to me as she sat fuming in the car. You want to press for criminal contempt? I nodded. Let's make it official. That night, I sat on the porch, coffee in hand, watching the sun disappear behind the ridge. In the distance, I could hear an owl calling from a pine snag. And for the first time in weeks, it didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like peace. The courtroom was small, almost underwhelming for how big the case had become. Wood-paneled walls, the hum of fluorescent lights, and a sleepy bailiff, who looked like he'd rather be fishing. But at the front, behind the bench, sat Judge Rosales. Sharp-eyed, no nonsense, and known countywide for having zero patience for procedural theatrics. Karen sat across from me in a navy blue blazer that still had creases from the packaging. Her legal counsel was a young guy from Albuquerque who looked like he was regretting every life choice that led him to defend an HOA president charged with vandalism, harassment, and contempt of court. Marina, my lawyer, sat beside me with a binder the size of a phone book. We'd compiled everything. Easement documents dating back 5 decades, certified county records, video footage of the sabotage, screenshots of the map tampering, logs of the phony inspection visit, and cherry on top, the footage of her second arrest in full HD. The judge spent most of the hearing flipping through pages, frowning deeper with each turn. Karen's attorney tried to argue procedural confusion, claimed the road was a disputed zone, and that her actions were driven by misunderstandings in governance roles. Judge Rosales cut him off. Counselor, your client filed forged notices, submitted altered survey maps to both Google and the county GIS portal, coordinated acts of property sabotage, and twice violated a restraining order. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a hobby. When the gavel dropped, it was almost anticlimactic. Karen was hit with a no-contact order. She couldn't come within 500 feet of my property or me indefinitely. The court ordered Clear Pine Ridge HOA to pay me $148,000 in damages, legal fees, and restitution for destroyed infrastructure. Most of it would be covered by the HOA's own liability insurance. The rest personal assets. A lien was filed against Karen's house before she even left the building. But the fallout didn't stop there. Within a month, residents of Clear Pine Ridge, inspired, emboldened, maybe just sick of the drama, filed to dissolve the HOA board entirely. An emergency audit revealed years of financial irregularities, including questionable landscaping invoices, unauthorized fines, and a mysterious budget line labeled Community Morale Programming, which appeared to be wine deliveries to Karen's address. The board was disbanded. A new oversight committee was formed. No presidents, no walkie-talkies, just adults trying to be neighbors again. As for me, I installed a new gate at the entrance to my property, matte of black steel, wide enough for a truck locked with a keypad. Above it, I hung a custom-made sign that read, "Private property. Not subject to you tried. You lost. Move on." Word got around. A few weeks later, Outdoor Life ran a full spread titled Backwoods Justice. How one cabin owner beat the HOA war machine. They interviewed me on my porch while I sipped coffee and let my dog chew the torn remains of the original HOA notice. I didn't say much, didn't have to. But my favorite moment came unexpectedly. One Saturday afternoon, I was loading supplies into the truck when a couple in a Subaru pulled up, map in hand, confused look on their faces. "Hey," the guy said, "we're looking at lots for sale. This road used to be in Clear Pine Ridge, right?" I nodded slowly. "And you own this cabin?" "Yep." He glanced at the gate, the sign, then back at me. "So, not HOA anymore?" I grinned. "Not even close." His wife leaned out the window. "Then I think we're ready to make an offer."